Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason. I'm your host from the Brand Identity Design Business Podcast. And we've been doing this season. I think this is my fifth season, and I've been consistently doing the dark side of entrepreneurship. Nothing really dark about this, but I like hearing perspective from interesting people out there. Sometimes they have a very nice MVP or USP or something unique they say, and that really attracts me because I'm in this world and I'm hungry to actually learn more. And I think these unique perspective not only helps you to have a better understanding of this world, but helps you to understand business at a very core level. It helps you with insights and ideas and strategies which might help you to navigate some of those business journeys. So today, I'm actually thrilled to kick off the season 5, episode 2, with an interview featuring the one and only Charlene Lee, whom you see next to me. Charlene, welcome to the podcast. I want to personally thank you for accepting my request. I know we had a very small notice, but you did say yes to it. I am very thrilled to have you. I've seen you on countless amount of videos by TED, by Harvard Business School, and all of these other videos wherein you speak about disruption. So I'm very, very happy, to have you on my podcast. Let me actually, guys, give you a heads up who Charlene is, just in case if you don't know about her. From the past 2 decades, Charlene Lee has been helping people to see the future. She is an expert on digital transformation, disruption leadership, strategy, customer experience, and the future of work. She's the author of 6 books, including the New York Times bestseller Open Leadership. She has also co-authored a critically acclaimed book called Groundswell, and her latest bestseller, which we are going to be discussing today, The Disruption Mindset. She's also currently working on the next book. We would be addressing that towards the mid of the interview, on how organizations and leaders can strategically use generative AI. Charlene is also an entrepreneur, the founder and CEO of Altimeter, a disruptive analyst firm that was acquired in 2015. Charlene has worked with hundreds of top companies ranging from Adobe, Southwest Airlines, has advised 49 of the future Fortune 100 companies. She has also spoken in numerous events like World Economic Forum, World Business Forum, South by Southwest. She's named one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company. She's also on the top LinkedIn Voices on Culture. She has graduated magna cum laude from Harvard College. She also received an MBA from Harvard Business School. She lives in San Francisco. It's pretty cold out there. And in her spare time, she teaches her cat tricks. So it's lovely once again. Virtually, guys, let's actually make some noise for Charlene. Let's make some noise. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much for
Charlene,
having
for.
me. Really
Yeah.
looking forward to this.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm also really excited, and I'm very thrilled to ask you these questions about disruption. Now, my first question to you, Charlene, I would like to know what makes disruptive leader, and how do these traits extend to create a disruptive organization. Now, I remember in one of those videos you had stated that a disruptive organization should have 3 important qualities they primarily focus on. I think the first one was strategy, the second one was leadership, third one was culture. So I don't know if the answer would be based on that, but let me hear it from you. I would like to know and learn from you. Go ahead, Charlie.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, my definition of a leader is somebody who creates change. And in particular, if you're not a person who's creating change, that's fine. You're a manager managing the status quo. But a leader creates change by your definition. And leadership is simply a relationship between people who choose to follow you because they're inspired by you. So you aspire to create change and you inspire people to follow you to make that change happen. So a disruptive leader is creating a huge amount of change. And to do that, I looked at a couple things. I asked people, how do you actually see yourself as a disruptive leader and then graded them on a whole bunch of different characteristics. And some of the most important characteristics that came about is that they look at disruption and change as an opportunity. They don't fear it. They sometimes even it just go afterward and look for change to create opportunities for growth. And so the disruptive leaders don't just create change, they create disruptive change because they know that to create the kind of change they want to see in the world, they're going to have to do something more than just incrementally getting there. And so the disruptive organization has a strategy that focuses on the future, leaders who are disruptive, who know how to create movements because movements take on a life of their own. And the third thing is they have cultures that are capable of dealing with flux. And those cultures are based on three key beliefs of being open, that people have agency to make decisions and to have impact on the outcomes, and that there's a bias for action. You're going to make decisions super fast. You have a great relationship with failure, and also this ability to let go of control, to not have to be in control. So those are the kind of characteristics that make up a great leader and then also a great organization.
That's such a lovely answer. So, a disruptive leader is a person who creates disruptive changes, or somebody who finds an opportunity uh, for a change. That is super cool, and I like what you have shared, and I appreciate what you have shared. Thank you so much for answering this question. Now, I remember, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, I don't recollect exactly when, but I saw a video wherein you spoke about disruption is often feared because we fear the unknown. And this is kind of the caption you had in that video. But imagine if you made a point to welcome the unknown and see change as an opportunity to make new discoveries, would you fear that? Would you have would you have to fear then? So, in your perspective, and the reason I'm asking you this is just the follow up. In your perspective, how do you believe individuals and organizations can shift their mindset not only to embrace disruption, but actively welcome the unknown as an opportunity to make new discoveries? And considering common fear is associated to this change, what strategies or insights do you think will be crucial to elevating or these fears,
Right.
fostering to a positive outlook towards disruption innovation? What do you think?
Right. The
I'm so,
word disruption, yeah, we hate the word disruption, and people are like, do you really want to associate with yourself with a negative word? And I go, well, we can think of disruption as something negative, as something that's bad. But I do believe that disruption is simply the fact that you are displaced, you're disrupted from your normal everyday. So you are pulled out of that comfort zone, and then you are pulled into a place where you don't know where you fit in the world anymore. And you can see that as a horrible thing, or you can see that as an opportunity to say, like, oh, I can look at the world now from a different perspective because I'm not locked into where I was before. So I'm going to take advantage of this, look around me with that eye of glass half full and versus a glass half empty, and say, how does the world look different? How do I think about myself now differently? And it's an opportunity to then take a different path potentially, or to go back and try to reestablish that new normal. Go back and establish a normal that feels like where it was before. But it's also an opportunity to say, maybe I shake it up. So I think about the disruption that we all experienced with COVID. It was incredibly difficult. Nobody wanted to happen. But we saw two groups of people who said, this is terrible. I just want to go back to the way the world was, and really became stuck. And others who said, well, this is the way the world is now. There's nothing I can do about it. How do I have to change myself, change my environment to make the best of it or even to take advantage of it? And the people who had that more optimistic, pragmatic approach fared better with COVID, were more resilient, but also came out on the other side with just being more ready to deal with the reality of what the world was like, but also to capture the opportunities, the new opportunities that presented themselves because of this change. So I like to say the thing that you have to fear, what do you have to fear? If you fear change, then that's a terrible place to be because everything is constantly changing. But if the fear is a feel of failure, a feel of shame, or a feel of fear of missing out or opportunity costs, then the way to counter that is to have confidence. And I look at confidence as not knowing, not necessarily that you will be successful, but knowing that no matter what the outcome is going to be, you're going to be okay. And when you have confidence that you're going to be okay, then you have a lot of courage and ability to go do a lot of things you never thought you were capable of.
That is lovely, Charlene. No point in fearing change because it's going to lead to growth, it's going to lead to innovation, it's going to lead to some unique ideas. So uh, this battle which we have, it doesn't it's senseless. So I appreciate that answer, and that actually brings me to my next question. And see that in every video I have seen or every excerpt you speak on, you mentioned this, that disruption is not a catalyst for growth, but rather growth itself. Now, to give people context, would you mind sharing an example or a case study that might illustrate this concept?
Sure. People oftentimes ask me, as a disruption strategy expert, so what's the next disruption technology we need to do and use in order to grow? And I go, no, you have it backwards. Growth itself is actually disruptive. So when you are growing faster and exponentially more than you thought you ever could or did in the past, that growth is going to be disruptive because by its nature, you have to change so many of the things that you do. So I know so many organizations that will put in some great plans, they start executing it, and they get to this really uncomfortable place where things are changing so much that they didn't anticipate, and it feels really uncomfortable. People are disrupted because of the growth, and they stop because they aren't prepared for the disruption that growth creates. And so, as a disruptive leader, if you're putting together these fantastic plans, and especially if you're an entrepreneur planning to grow a lot, at some point, that level of growth and acceleration may outstrip your comfort level. So, in which case, how do you create the structures and the ability to continue to grow and grow at a fast pace, but have enough stability so that everyone feels comfortable and are not displaced? And so the examples of these very large organizations that tech companies, for example, are that they can have they put in place these changes. But my favorite example of this is is a small organization called Southern New Hampshire University, and it's a university privately run as a nonprofit. And the president, Paul LeBlanc, has put in so much structure so that as the organization is constantly changing and running its online education, and they're the largest provider of online courses and degrees. They have over 150,000 students getting degrees with them, and their actual campus is only 3,000 students. So it's not Harvard, it's not MIT or Stanford who are providing this online education. It's a small little university in New Hampshire that's doing a fantastic job, and they're constantly innovating. They're creating disruption left and right. They have competency based degrees instead of hours and courses. So they're doing a lot of change. And yet, when you talk to the people there, they don't feel like they're going through a lot of change because they have put in so many of these structures so that the people don't feel disrupted, even though the jobs, the work, the students are constantly changing and engaging in disruptive activities.
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful example. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, this actually brings me to my next question, which I have. In your be some of those common misconceptions that companies or organizations have about disruption, and how can they shift their mindset and align with the reality, which you just spoke just a while back?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest misconception is that it's something to be avoided. And so whenever a disruption comes up or whenever somebody comes up with a disruptive idea, they're basically told, that's a crazy. We could never do that. Sit down, shut up, do your job. Don't think out of the box. And then they turn around and say, oh, we need innovation. We need new ideas. And you can't do the two together. I think of innovation, one of the biggest issues is that we think of innovation as this neat and tidy process that we can put a timeline against and a budget against, and we'll have beautiful innovations that will drive growth on the other end. The reality is, innovation is very messy. You never know what's going to work. And if you do it right, it's going to be disruptive. And yet we do not prepare for it because we don't want to have disruption. So, what most companies do is what I call innovation theater. You cook up some great ideas, you bring in the executives, look, ooh, ah, that's great. And then they go back to the regular jobs, the lights come on, the applause is gone, and nothing has changed. The reality is, if you want to innovate, if you want to grow, you have to do things very differently. And that means changing the core of what the company does. It's looking at the things that you have traditionally done in the past and saying, is that the right thing we should be doing? It's constantly asking. And so the mindset that has to change is, instead of trying to preserve the status quo, it's saying, where do we want to go in the future? And having a very, very clear idea what the future looks like. And most organizations are in this auto mode. They are just doing the same thing every year. They're incrementally getting a little better next year. They have incremental innovations. And the reality is, they're just standing still rather than really becoming more innovative, more growth, serving their customers. And their customers will no longer stay with them because other people are innovating, disrupting around you. And you're not aware because you're so keen on trying to avoid disruption. So that's the downward spiral. It feels really good and comfortable, but the reality is, you're like one of those frogs in a pan and you have no idea how hot it's going to get until it's boiling.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I totally agree with you there that sometimes people who come up with innovative ideas, people are not really comfortable going to someplace uncomfortable, so they have this repulsion they have, and they may not adopt an idea, or they may not like an idea, they might find it too risky and stuff like this. So I appreciate the point, and I appreciate what you're trying to clarify in terms of
Yeah.
disruption.
You know,
Now,
one
yeah.
of the
Mhm.
sayings I like to say is, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And I really try to live that every day. I try to do something adventurous, something that gets me out of my routines. I'll take a different path. I'll try to navigate without my GPS on. I'll get lost. Again, those things that get you out of your comfort zone are the things that encourage you to, in general, if you do this every day in your life, then you will be more prepared to deal with that and have the resilience to deal with that in your work too, as well. So living in a disruptive state with a disruption mindset, where you're looking at change as an opportunity to learn something new, do something new, have a different perspective, is something you have to practice every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, who would have thought that disruption can also apply to you as an individual and your personal life? So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Charlene, for sharing that, golden nugget there. I want to actually address something which I have seen repeatedly on your videos, wherein you keep asking these organizations whom you work with, and even the one we're just trying to make them understand about disruption. You ask them, what is your understanding about this future customer of yours? Why organization needs to prioritize their understanding of this future customer? Would you mind speaking on this and help my audience and listeners understand why we need to focus on the future customer and how it benefits us?
Right. It's a very tangible way. The future customer concept is a very tangible way to think about your strategy. A strategy is simply saying, we're here today and we want to get to here tomorrow. Well, what does tomorrow look like? And I go into most organizations, and this is what I say to leaders: you have to know, every single person in your organization should be able to answer three questions. Who is your future customer? In other words, tell me a story about this customer you want to serve in the future. And then what's your strategy of how to get there? What are the things we're going to do, and also what we're not going to do in order to meet the needs of that future customer? Because we don't meet them today. And third, what is your personal role in executing that strategy? How are you personally going to make that strategy a success? And I believe that a leader's job is just to make sure that everyone in the organization is aligned and able to answer those three questions. So the reason why the future customer is so important, it represents who you are building this whole future for. So you can talk about, we want to be an innovative company that has these products and everything, but why? It's to serve those customers. And the hard part is, those customers probably don't exist right now. And I like to tell the story of Adobe. When they went to the cloud, they went from CD-ROMs to the cloud. When they started this whole journey, nobody was asking to get Adobe's design and marketing services in the cloud. They were perfectly happy getting Photoshop on a disk, but they knew things were going to the iPad. Their cycle times for product development was really slow, 18 to 24 months, and they saw the cloud as the future. But that was a future customer that didn't exist, but they had a very strong vision of what that would look like to drive this disruption. And they needed it because they knew to make this transition, it would take 2 years of losing money. 8 straight quarters going to Wall Street as a publicly traded company saying, we lost more money this quarter. And so they needed a really strong story about who this future customer was, the strategy of how to get there, and everybody in the organization knew why they were doing this. It was not pretty, it was not easy, but the result is they were successful in driving that disruptive change and transformation. Their stock price increased by 10x over those 2 years, so something you never see is a company's, profit going down and having losses, and the stock price going up at the same time. And it's because people could see that the reason they were sustaining these losses was because their strategy was working. So it's one of my favorite case studies of a disruptive company that a lot of companies turn away from disruption because it's going to be too hard. Lose money for 2 straight years as a publicly traded company and risk a takeover of our stock prices that maintain. That's really risky. We don't want to do that. That makes no sense. But the only way to counter those fears and those concerns is to have this laser focus on what the futures could look like and to articulate it in the form of a future customer.
Absolutely. This Adobe example is what actually caught my attention towards you, because I was randomly watching one of those videos of yours and you gave this lovely example about how Adobe, and being a designer, I'm passionate about design. So when I heard this example, it made complete sense. Like, it was something which hit me like, oh, that's like a natural progression. I mean, what else they could have done? Today, with Adobe's cloud storage and subscription which is available, I mean, I can't imagine doing my tasks efficiently without that system in place, without that advancement, or without that idea being executed that way. So this is super cool, and thank you so much for sharing this example. I still remember that graph wherein the stock prices were high, and I still remember watching those videos by you wherein you gave that example. I'm so sorry I don't have a clip of that, but you said something very interesting with the Adobe's example. You said that uh, developing this mindset is hard and also challenging. This journey is challenging. 2 years, you said, the organization was in the process of taking a hit in terms of revenue. Can you elaborate, first of all, why it is a challenging journey? I mean, you kind of gave us a synopsis, but can you elaborate maybe the key challenges an organization would typically face when they are trying to be disruptive, and how can they overcome these challenges?
Yeah, again, I talked about just the financial challenges that they faced. They also, all the other customers didn't want it. They actually signed a petition. 50,000 customers signed a petition saying, we want to go back to CD-ROMs. We don't want this cloud thing. And then the employees were up in arms because we're going to have to change everything that we do, the way we sell, the way we market, the way we even do financing and accounting was going to have to change. Everything was changing. And I was an analyst at the time covering them. And people were calling me left and right, like, you will not believe the things we're doing at Adobe. It's crazy. It's insane. This company has lost it. We're betting all of the company on this crazy strategy to go into the cloud, which nobody wants. So when I say this was disruptive, the reason why they were able to do it is because that leadership team was 100% aligned. They literally looked around with each other and said, are we going to do this? If we're going to do this, we have to be 100% sure. There's no turning back. And they had the advantage of having worked together for 5 years. It was a very solid leadership team. They trusted each other. And so this is such an important thing for them to be able to do, to have it all come back together.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to also ask you another question, just out of curiosity. So, according to me, the way I look at it, so there is, when you have such a disruptive change or some sort of actions which you're trying to take, which leads to disruption, there are challenges which you face internally as an organization, like the staff example. Staff may not see the same vision as the leadership team has, and then you have external factors, like feedback and other things which comes into place. So what suggestion or what recommendation do you have for such leadership, how to deal with people within the organization who may be very hesitant to that change, when the leadership team knows where they want to head, but the people who are working for them may not see the same vision? What would you suggest for those such
Right.
organizations, how to deal with that?
There's a difference between, do you agree with the strategy or are you uncomfortable with the change? If you're uncomfortable with the change, we can do lots of things. We can create moats, we can create boundaries, we can make the change more incremental, but we will change. And we will encourage these worried skeptics, is who I call them. And they're not detractors, they're just worried and a little skeptical. But you can work with them to say your skepticism is well deserved because this is really risky. This is really hard. This is uncomfortable. What's going on? Because your concerns are probably very valid. So it's to validate them. But it's very different if somebody disagrees with your strategy. Because if you are already committed to doing the strategy, and if someone does not agree with the strategy, then you have to have a very different conversation to say, if you don't agree with the strategy, then this is not the place for you. And we'll do our best to find you another job and encourage you and support you in finding that other job. But this is not the right place if you don't agree with the strategy. And then when it came to the customers, when they were petitioning and saying, we want to go back, the company basically said, we burned the boats. There's no going back. So you can long and hope that the old days will come back, but you can still use a CD-ROM, but we're not going to update that anymore. If you want the updated version, you're going to have to come along with the cloud. And they were pretty confident that their product was superior to any other solution out there. So, yeah, they kind of said to the marketers, this is, if you want to come along on this bus, come along on this journey with us. We would love to have you along. But it was that clarity of the vision. One person said, the leadership just never blinked. They never faltered. They never strayed away from their vision of what the future could look like. And they just kept repeating it over and over and over again. This is the future. This is what we're aiming for. These are the customers we're trying to serve. This is the future we want to create. Let's go there.
Absolutely. I really loved how you responded. Do you agree with this strategy, or are you uncomfortable with that change? With the change, that kind of nails it right away, because it kind of makes you, think about this in a very much more logical way. So, thank you. I appreciate that very, very much. So, Charlene, my next question is, would you mind sharing a little background as to what made you get interested in disruptive growth, or the complexities about disruption? Was there any specific life experience or work related experience that kind of sparked your interest to get into this whole thing?
Yeah, just as a bit of background, I'm obviously a woman and Asian American, and I grew up in Detroit. And there were very, very few Asians and very few Chinese in Detroit. And so just by me being in existence and walking into a room, I was a disruptive force. So people are like, you don't fit in. And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm completely different. So growing up in that environment in my formative years really prepared me to and looked at things from a very different perspective. And so as I was in school, I was just really drawn to change and transformation. And when I came out of business school in 1993, the internet was just coming available. And I just went, this is going to change the world. So I looked for a job in a place where things were going to change very quickly. And I settled on newspapers and settled on the San Jose Mercury News, which is in the middle of Silicon Valley. So I ended up at a company that was going to go through a huge amount of change, by putting newspapers online. And also just the business model was going to change, and I wanted to be in the middle of all of that. And then to be in Silicon Valley where all of this was being created really would put me in a good place. But then I said, well, I enjoy leading people and creating companies, and I started my own analyst firm that was very disruptive. I realized my love has always been in research, and so I joined an analyst firm where I could just constantly be at the front edge of the front end of disruption, being at that edge. And being able to interpret it, create understanding of how these new technologies and business trends were going to impact people, companies, and leaders. So I've built an entire career on that. And when I started my company, again, as a very small analyst firm competing against really big ones, we had to do something very disruptive. So we put all of our research out for free and use social media, which we were covering, to really drive huge amounts of readership against it and built a huge brand. And so when I sold the company, they weren't just doing an acqui-hire, they were buying the brand of Altimeter because we had put so much behind it. They wanted the digital brand and the reputation that came with that. So when I think about building disruption and creating disruption, I have some hands-on experience in doing that. And I can tell you, it is not easy. And it is incredibly nerve-wracking because you're doing something that no one else is doing. And everybody around you thinks you're crazy. You're giving away your research for free. You're putting newspapers online. You're moving your business to the cloud. Why would you do that? And again, it's this vision for what the future could look like and the possibilities of the change of how that could just make things in people's lives just so much better.
That is such a lovely share, Charlene. Thank you so much for helping my audience and my listeners understand what was the background, what inspired you to get into disruption. And you had like hands down experience, real time experiencing what was disruption, and you were able to capitalize on it. You were able, now at this moment of time, now you are a pioneer when it comes to disruption, because now not only you witness it, but you also teach entrepreneurs how to make that happen. So hats off to that growth. I think you are very inspiring. You are teaching me a lot of things, and I'm sure people who are listening to this podcast, over video or audio, all of them, I'm positive, people have a lot of appreciation for you. I want to give a shout out to some of the individuals who are listening to us live on LinkedIn audio. I see Nurma, Claudia, Jay, and my good friend Leslie. Thank you so much, guys, for your love and support. We will do Q&A in about 5 to 7 minutes. If you do have questions, do not hesitate to come up on stage virtually on LinkedIn. And Charlene should be able to address all those questions you have about disruption. My next question, Charlene, is to you, is about leaders who want to get into a disruptive mindset or wants to instill a disruptive mindset within the organization, but they're kind of unsure where to begin this whole journey, where to start. What advice would you have for such organizations and leaders?
I would look at your business strategy and say, look at your strategy and say, how far out into the future are you really looking? Are you really planning? And most organizations, like this quarter, maybe the end of the year, they don't really have a strategy. They basically have an operating plan and a budget. That's not a strategy. A strategy, really take a look at your strategy and understand, how disruptive is it? How uncomfortable is it? And if you feel pretty comfortable that you can achieve your strategy, it's not disruptive enough. You want to put together a strategy and then that looks a little bit further out into the future, or thinks of a more audacious future, like what could you actually achieve? And the reason why I like to put out very audacious goals, goals that you cannot achieve, is that you will act very differently if you're trying to achieve a higher goal than if you're trying to hit a lower goal. So I'll give a very concrete example. I was talking to an organization, it was a university, and they were doing a fundraising. And they said, basically, we raised $1.5 billion the last cycle. We're going to aim for a little bit more. We're going to go be really big. We're going to go for two. And I'm like, that's great. What would it take to do three? What would it take to double what you raised in the last cycle? And he sat back and he said, "Well, I know exactly how we would do it, but we probably wouldn't achieve it. We come short." And I'm like, "Well, what if you were to get like 2.5 or 2.7? Isn't that better than 2?" And so he thought about it and he said, "Yeah." And so they went back, rewrote their entire plan to aim for 3, thinking that they'll probably hit 2 easily. And they ended up getting very close to 3 because they were acting in a very different way. So I would encourage you as a leader to say, if you were to shoot for bigger, more audacious goals that you knew you couldn't achieve, but as you came close, that would be a really good thing. What would the world look like? Because we as leaders are very achievement oriented. We like to hit our goals. And I think reasonable, pragmatic, achievable goals are great. There are things that you just know you want to get done. But if you really want to be a disruptor, then what are the big, hairy, audacious goals that you want to set for yourself? Because you will begin the journey from a very different perspective, do very different things. And along the way, you'll hit your goals that you've committed to, but you can also do so much more. So this has everything to do with how we define success, how our relationship with failure, what it looks like, and it's really rethinking a lot of the ways of how we run our organizations too, as well.
That is incredible, Charlene. I love the way how you've come up with these interesting questions you often ask these leaders. Like I like how you started, like how far fetched are you looking into the future? uh, how comfortable are you with it? How could you achieve it? These are interesting questions because it makes the opposite person really think at a strategic level, that am I just focused on this quarter or this year, or am I really looking ahead? So that makes absolute sense, and I appreciate that those examples which you shared. Thank you so much for that, Charlene. So my next question, and we would be starting with Q&A shortly. So guys, if you're interested, please raise your hand and I would be happy to bring you up. If not, I have some other questions which I would, ask Shali, and we will move ahead with this interview. And if you're unable to come up, please do not hesitate to maybe post it on chat or put it on the comments, and I should be able to pick this up. So my question is about, what do you believe will be the evolving role of disruption in a business landscape, and how should companies prepare themselves for the future?
Well, again, there's 2 types of disruptions, ones that are just happening with or without you. So, oh my goodness, where do we start? We had COVID, we have war, we have economic downturns and turnarounds, recessions, inflation. We have the instability of our elections here in the United States. Again, there's so many disruptions happening all around us. So disruption is something you can't avoid. And then there are the disruptions that we create ourselves, that we say we are no longer satisfied with where we are sitting and we want to move to a different place. So we're going to disrupt ourselves. So I think for businesses, disruption is a reality. Change is a reality. Um, we kind of think of this as a perma crisis. It was the word of the year back in 2022, and the perma crisis says we used to think that here's a crisis, let's deal with it, and then when it's done, we can go back and do all the things that we had to put aside. But when we're going from crisis to crisis, disruption to disruption, there's never a chance to take a breath, then we can suffer from fatigue, from change fatigue, disruption fatigue. We just get really tired. So I really think about how we have to get much better at dealing with change, creating change, responding to change. And the companies who do this really well are not the ones who do huge leaps of change forward. What they do is are really good at making small changes quickly and constantly. So they're making a small change, checking around to see if everything's good, creating a new normal, establishing a new status quo, and then doing it again and again and again. And those cycles are very, very quick in the most disruptive firms. And that's how you can create that stability that's so important and reduce the amount of fatigue. The reason why people get change fatigue is that you put this huge effort into making change and it doesn't happen. You don't get the benefits of putting all that effort in because you got bored, you gave up focus, it was too hard, you changed your mind. And so you no longer believe that leader when they say, we've got to change, if the previous changes never stuck. So I think that leaders and companies need to prepare themselves by getting really good at changing. You think about all our processes are focused on keeping things in the status quo. Well, let's look at our processes and see how they can actually help us change. Do we have built-in processes that will sunset old products and services that are no longer there? Or is it a huge ordeal to clean out your portfolio and find new spaces? How do we stop doing things that are no longer serving us and start doing things that are going to serve us for the future? So, having this change process built into the organization, it's the sort of built in obsolescence, is a really important process and governance to have.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Having that built into you is what is required to drive that change, drive that disruption, and how to go move ahead with things. Thank you, Charlene. No, that was lovely. I like the way how you shared it. You have a very unique way of just making things simple and just elaborating it to my listeners and to myself. So this is super cool. I have another question for you, and after that we will take a break. Uh, could you could you give us could you give my listeners more information about your forthcoming book on generative AI? Tell us, what exactly are you trying to do with this book? Whom are you trying to target? What kind of information are you trying to communicate with this book?
Yeah, the book is very much focused on how to create a strategy around generative AI. And there's a lot of great writing around this right now, but it tends to be very tactical and explain most of the work today explains what generative AI is, what the future could look like, its benefits, its downsides, but it doesn't talk about how you as an organization and as a leader need to be thinking about this. And I see generative AI as one of the most transformative forces we have ever faced. And again, I've been in this space since the beginning of the internet, so I've seen a lot of change come along the way. And I talked to some of my colleagues who've also been around for this ride. We all agree that the nature of generative AI is a huge transformative, disruptive force. And yet, when we talk to most organizations, they're looking at it and going, I don't want to deal with it right now. It's crazy. It's undependable. It's still changing. It's too early to have a strategy. And my sense is you have to have a strategic approach to this. And most organizations are not taking it. So that's why I'm writing the book. The book title is called Threats, Bets, and No Regrets: How to Create a Winning Generative AI Strategy. And
That's a
the
lovely.
idea, yeah. I'm sorry, say that again? You like the
I'm so
title?
sorry. I was saying that was a nice title. Could you repeat that title again? You said threats. What
Sure.
was that?
It's